People ask me, why are you going to Iran? And I thought about it. Why am I going to Iran? And it occurred to me, I'm going here because I think it's good character to know people before you bomb them.
Election night, November 2012. I'm at a hotel in downtown Seattle with a group of people at a private party celebrating what will be the legalization of recreational marijuana in Washington State, Initiative 502. And my friend Elaine is down at the Two Bells Tavern down the way a bit and invites me for a drink. And so I go and she ends up buying me 3 vodka tonics, not the fancy stuff, just bar pour. And of course, hard liquor is usually poison to me, but I do remember we're sitting there next to us at a table were a bunch of like 20-something overweight, pale-looking computer types celebrating at the bar. They all worked for PopCap Games. And this was a company, I think it had just been sold for $1 billion or something. And so all these 20-something programmers are incredibly rich now, and they're celebrating by drinking heavily. And they're rich because they helped work on a game called Plants vs. Zombies. And they're ignoring the TV with the election results. Anyway, I end up going back to this party, saying goodbye to Elaine, and I am inebriated. So I want to get there's some celebrities at this party. I want to get a picture of me with Rick Steves to celebrate this night. And Rick is there because he's a tireless supporter of causes that he believes in, one of which was legalizing recreational marijuana. He poured his time and his resources into this cause. So of course he's at the party. So I find my friend Morocco, who's this medical pot dispensary owner and eccentric with a cockatoo. She didn't bring the cockatoo to the party. I'm like, Morocco, here's my digital SLR. Let's go find Rick Steves and so I can get a picture. So we find Rick, and I'm, slightly inebriated. Rick, I have a picture of marijuana. And so I give Morocco the camera, and she takes a picture, but I fucked up the settings somehow. And so, how to describe this, but instead of the flash going off, the flash buzzes like zzz, bzz, and creates some irritating strobe effect. And we finally get the shot, but Rick, rightfully so, is visibly irritated. And I still have the picture, and Rick looks irritated, and I just look like shit. And the fun thing is that I think I drove drunk going home that night from downtown Seattle to South Seattle. That was the first and only time I've ever driven drunk. After those 3 poisonous bar pour vodka tonics and maybe a beer or 2 at this pot party. That's the intro to a short and sweet episode 43 of the Doomed Planet podcast. Everybody loves Rick Steves. Rick Steves is the king. I even, did some searches trying to dig up some dirt on the guy. Anything? No, he's a wonderful person. He has a great life. His life has been shut down as of late by COVID. His business is based not just on writing travel guides, but on, organizing tours of Europe. I think he has over 100 employees, and that's shut down right now. But I always liked reading about travel more than actually traveling, and now's a good time to pick up some of his books. Now, some of his guidebooks don't really work as leisure reading. They are actual guidebooks with, helpful information about, where to get a taxi and whatnot. For example, Rick Steves Italy 2020, and it's a lucrative thing. Rick Steves has done well for himself. In the publishing world, what is better than, we have to do the book again, and people are going to buy the same book because we've updated it. Luckily for Rick Steves fans, such as myself, he's got a book that came out July 7th, For the Love of Europe, My Favorite Places, People, and Stories. And this is kind of, a rehash of some of his best work. And when he records a show for one of his travel shows, It's a pretty lean operation. I think he's got a camera guy, lighting cameraman, and sound guy, and him going to these locations. And maybe there's a producer or two back at the hotel. And then Rick actually writes much of the script for the show, either beforehand or after. So before we dive into Rick Steves, America's greatest person, and again, Doom Planet, we've been doing some bummer podcasts. So I wanted to do one about someone that everyone loves. Go to ricksteves.com. Maybe pick up his book. I do also have a special announcement. This whole Doom Planet, Seattle crime, whatnot podcast, this has really been a warm-up and an experiment. I wanted to see if I could do 52 episodes, a weekly podcast this year. But next year, the primary project is going to be launched. And it doesn't have a name yet, but it's all obituaries. Just one person per episode, and you don't have to be famous. You don't have to be evil. You just have to be dead. So I'm looking forward to that. I actually broke my own rule, and I did a podcast about someone that is still alive, or a couple of those. And one was Notorious Seattle Boozers, Erica C. Barnett. And I mentioned on Twitter, did she not use real names of people in her book? And I got this snide tweet back that said an obsessive internet loser, and that may be true, but is congratulating himself for figuring out that Josh in my book is my friend, Josh Fight. And it's like, first of all, Erica is the first one to take offense when someone, calls her out for being, self-employed, citizen journalist or independent journalist. She works for her own company. The C is for crank. She's not associated with any media entities other than going on the radio and doing stuff as a guest. She's the first to take offense at that. And I'm a real journalist. And yet she calls me an obsessive internet loser. Internet loser. Yeah, but we're the same thing, Erica, except I don't have to torture myself by sitting through city council meetings and blogging about them. Anyway, I also, and again, I'm getting in trouble here. I want to do a podcast about dead people because they're not going to complain. And so I was like, Erica, Josh Fight, the same Josh Fight that worked for, alleged child molester, Ed Murray, and who worked for him up until the last minute. The same Josh Fight that palled around with and wrote about his friendship with alleged abuser Sherman Alexie, and also alleged abuser Dave Meinert. So, zing! And that Erica episode is one of our most popular. Anyway, let's get back to someone who's not a dick and who is charming and who doesn't, write hate tweets dismissing people. She blocked me, and then I went to one of my other accounts, and she's like, oh, you have so many burner accounts. And I'm like, this other account was started in 2010 and has 1,200 followers. It's not a burner account. So again, she can dish it out and she can't take it. But you know who can dish it out and who can take it? Rick Steves.
Yo, I'm a tortilla.
I'm a tortilla, baby. I got cheese.
I got beans.
I got the little bit of meat and
sour cream.
People might not know this, but Rick can play the piano, and his dad was actually a high school band director. And that's what a charming occupation. There's not you're not polluting the earth as an Exxon executive or doing something evil. There's nothing bad you can say about a high school band director. So he has this nice family, and he grew up in Edmonds, Washington, which is a charming town north of Seattle, and that's where he lives to this day, and that's where his office is. They built a building, a custom building, and it's the only building in Edmonds that has gargoyles, apparently. And again, it's that attention to detail and just that appreciation of art. That's Rick Steves. And Rick was one of those lucky people who found his calling early in life. He's traveling through Europe, and in 1979, he puts out the first edition of his book, Europe Through the Back Door, a guide about how to travel in Europe. And multiple best-selling travel guides would follow. And the travel stuff is lucrative. His long-running TV show, I guess he's on his second series now, produced relatively cheaply. You have Rick and a lighting cameraman and a sound guy going on location, shooting stuff. Maybe a couple other people back at the hotel, producers making phone calls and whatnot. And that's it. And that's your show. And Rick sits there and writes it out. He has sort of a corny writing style, but again, that's part of his charm. So Rick has made a lot of money, and he's also donated a shitload of money to good causes. Not just to reform marijuana laws, but to support solutions to homelessness. He's given millions of dollars to help homeless women. He donated a $4 million apartment complex for homeless women and kids to the YWCA. He donates royalties from one of his books to Bread for the World. He gave $1 million to the Edmonds Center for the Arts. Some of these businesses that took PPP money, took this COVID relief money, are like Shake Shack and stuff, are being criticized. Like, what? Well, you're a multi-million-dollar business. How can you take this money? In Rick's case, yeah, it's a multi-million-dollar business, but he's not a billionaire, and he's more generous than the next person by far. And not only that, but that money can be put towards, keeping food on the table for his employees. And I'm sure they all love working there and love him, and they have decent, well-paying jobs. And so, yeah, travel as a political act, as Rick would say. Like any decent, patriotic American, Rick Steves hates Donald Trump. In 2017, he posted on his blog that he'd donate $1 for every dollar spent on his website on Inauguration Day. He donated $1 of that to the ACLU. People purchased almost $50,000 worth of merchandise because of that, and so he wrote a check for $50K to the ACLU. And he said, those of us with passports and who are wealthy enough to travel a lot, especially white, straight Christian males like me, don't often think a lot about civil liberties, at least not in an immediate or personal way. Civil liberties just aren't an issue for most of us. If a wealthy person is in trouble with the law, he can hire a good lawyer. It's the poor who are filling our prisons. If I want to smoke pot, no one's going to arrest me. It's poor and black people who get arrested and then disenfranchised. I have a voice because I fit societal norms and I have money. So woke Steves. Rick Steves is a woke person. Someone is rare in our hyper-competitive and sick capitalist society to encounter someone with such empathy, especially someone that has made a bunch of money. But that's Rick. Rick is a Christian. He's a Lutheran. That's one of the cooler branches of Christianity, right? It's not quite Unitarian. It's like, no, there's not going to be a keg of beer at the service, but still pretty cool. And he also is a believer in liberation theology. Just long story short, that is a school of Marxist leftist thought. Again, you can't go wrong with this fucking guy. Rick has 2 kids. He got divorced in 2010. And he's dating someone named Trish Feaster, a somewhat of a travel person, a cute woman, apparently much younger than Rick. And if you look at her Instagram now, it looks like she's with some other guy who's got this slicked back gray hair and not many Instagram followers. And as of late, Rick has been dating The Reverend Shelley M. Bryan Wee, a Lutheran, is it minister? I had not a religious person, don't want to get that wrong. And unbelievably, she's powerful within the church. She's very cute, very short, petite, blonde woman. Rick is 6'3" or something. This is an odd couple, but that makes sense given his Lutheran beliefs. And there's a great video on YouTube of 2019, November 2nd, 2019, at St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle, the rite of installation of the Reverend Shelley M. Bryan Wee as the 5th bishop of the Northwest Washington Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So, yeah, she's not fucking around there with that.
Almighty God bless you and direct your days and your deeds in peace, that you may be a faithful servant of Christ. Amen. Please stand. And if you would gather just a little bit over here, look at me.
So that's Rick's personal life. And again, he's a hedonist in a way. And part of what he sells, it's travel porn in the sense that I can sit and watch Rick travel around Italy, and I'm pretending Rick is me, and I'm doing that, and I'm eating that delicious food. So, and he gets a kick out of it. It is a grind in a way. No matter what you're doing, film and video production is a brutal grind. So this guy has had, born in 1955. He's a baby boomer, starting to age. He has worked his ass off over the years. Sure, it's fun, and sure, you're eating and drinking in Spain and Portugal or whatever, but it's still work. Especially when he has to go back to the hotel and, write a script for the next day's shoot. And so that's the only thing. And again, half of everyone gets divorced that gets married. That's the dirt I dug up on Rick Steves. He got divorced and then had a couple girlfriends, and now he's with a Lutheran bishop, Christian something. So I think Rick is settling down. I think maybe COVID is okay, let's slow down the grind here and just enjoy life and enjoy my peaceful life and keep giving money away to good causes. Back when Rick was dating Trish Feaster in 2014, he had a fundraiser at his house for the 36th District Democrats and Jeannie Cole Wells, someone I have interviewed in the past and a strong supporter of legalization of marijuana. So, small world. And again, tireless Rick Steves. He's not sitting around, watching YouTube or playing video games. He's out there doing stuff, raising money for good causes, building his business, employing people in a small business. And again, there's some criticism of, all this travel and tourism is like a fossil fuel, disaster. And he immediately donated money to some climate projects. He's like, yeah, you're right. Getting on an airplane is like getting on a giant gas guzzling bus. And if you fly from New York to LA, you're using as much gas as if you drove solo in an SUV or jet fuel, whatever the fuck it is. On July 28th, Cairo Radio did a fun piece. With travel canceled, Rick Steves cuts an onion and turns on his oven for the first time ever. So that's funny. I remember when Michael Pollan admitted that he's not a cook when he did this book called Cooked, I think. And I thought, wow, what a scam. The guy's writing about food and he doesn't even know how to cook. But with Rick, it makes sense because he's the king of going to great restaurants all over Europe. What a privilege that is. And he knows it, and it's a great thing. But ever since he was a teenager, 65-year-old travel guru Rick Steves has spent a few months of every year in Europe. But now Europe has literally closed its doors to United States travelers. And so it's tough to be home, says Rick. So Rick is in shock. For the first time in my life, I'm cuddling with dogs at night and walking them in the afternoon. I never got that, and now I get it. For the first time in my life, I'm cooking. I've owned my house for 10 years, and I've never turned on the oven. I've never really barbecued before, but now I love it. He's never sliced an onion in his life. Rick, we finally found the dirt on you, you lazy, not onion slicing bastard. According to Cairo the Crux, surviving this pandemic, this quarantine is dependent on a positive attitude. It's all about what you make of it, and Steve's is making music. Every night in Edmonds, my house is on a bluff overlooking the town. As the sun goes down, I get out my old trumpet and I play taps, he said. My valves are all stuck, so I have to treat my trumpet like a bugle. But when I'm done playing taps, there's a smattering of whoops and hollers and clapping that's all over the community. And in a stroke of good timing, Rick released his book for the love of Europe. It's not a guidebook because his guidebooks aren't selling well. It's essays about his favorite places. You can get that at ricksteves.com. Rick is the master of the purple prose, but he pulls it off. In the book, he says, Nazare is one of my favorite beach towns anywhere. It greets me with the energetic applause of the surf. And he eats some barnacles. Any place famous as a last undiscovered tourist frontier probably no longer is, says Rick. And he's, seen Europe evolve over the decades. Now we're talking, Rick is mentioning eating Portugal's beloved seafood stew, cataplana. And the cataplana is a type of a cooking utensil with a top on it. The stew itself, there are variations, but who doesn't love a tomatoey, garlicky stew with sausage and clams? The jamón ibérico, eating it, Rick says, was the culinary equivalent of pinning a boutonniere onto a tux. Food, sex, travel, basic human decency. Rick Steves is a lover of these things, and that's why we love him. He's in Spain, and then comes a bouncy flower child from Berlin, a 20-year-old girl hiking alone, singing to herself, and radiant with appreciation for this personal journey. She speaks to me as if she were a real saint come to earth. Talking with her, I feel I've entered a Botticelli painting, and I don't want to leave. And of course, Sandro Botticelli painted The Birth of Venus, the famous nude of a woman riding in a scallop shell, and which was, in its day, of pornography. Beautifully, they really had classy pornography during the Renaissance. Rick, you pervert. Actually, no, he's got the right idea. September 8th, 2009, European Flesh and the American Prude. Sex is one aspect of the cultural divide that titillates any American traveler to Europe, who's window-shopped a magazine kiosk, gone to a beach or park on a sunny day, or channel-surfed broadcast TV late at night where they show boobs and stuff. Rick is not comfortable with all of this, some of these aspects of European sexuality. During a construction industry convention in Barcelona, locals laughed that they had to actually bus in extra prostitutes from France. I find the crude sexual postcards on racks all over the continent gross. The Benny Hill-style TNA that inundates TV throughout Mediterranean Europe boorish. And the topless models strewn across page 3 of so many British newspapers insulting to women. Rick says you may not want to bring the more casual European approach to sex and the human body back home with you. I'm not saying we should all run around naked, but I suspect that children raised in America, where sex is often considered dirty, are more likely to have an uncomfortable relationship with sex and their bodies than those in Europe. And again, Rick Steves Europe Incorporated received a PPP loan of $1 to $2 million. It was approved on April 15th. But, with 126 employees and not a lot of income coming in, that's tide over money at best, or that is not going to last forever if these horrors the world is experiencing persist. Rick's industry is scenic and sightseeing, transportation, other. Imagine that Americans are not allowed to travel to Europe right now. It's sad. That's Rick is getting a loan that is because his business enriches our culture and it opens our minds. Anything that makes you smarter is good for society as a whole. And traveling over to Europe and using Rick's guide, like in-person guide, he also has audio guides to various museums and locations. That's going to make you fucking smarter, you fucking American beer-bellied dumbass fucknuts. Travel and Leisure, August 5th. Rick Steves is willing to put his travel business on hold for as long as it takes. Lock it all down. I wish more people in positions of power would understand that lock it all down concept, especially people administering our public schools. For the first summer in over 30 years, travel icon Rick Steves is stuck at home in Edmonds, and he's okay with that. Rick says, "We have to realize it's just not how am I going to make my business get through this. It's what are we going to do to hold our society together when we have so much anxiety and hard times ahead of us." Thank you, Rick. A voice of sanity in a world gone mad. My God, I found it. Rick Steves, the dirt on Rick Steves. He's actually an evil person. January 2015. From ricksteves.com, the Rick Steves Tour Guide's Disco Party Boat. If you have a lot of European friends in town in Seattle, a perfect night out is dancing in your own private party boat on the Puget Sound with a 1970s disco theme. Our tour guides emptied the shelves and shirt racks at the local second-hand shops to fashion extravagant 1970s costumes, and we had the night of our lives. And then you see some middle-aged white people partying, wearing horrible costumes. Rick, you're a devil. You are pure evil. No. Rick Steves put out his book Travel as a Political Act, the first edition in 2009. NPR says the fact that he openly admits to finding himself stymied by cultural and political complexities doesn't make the more uncomfortable or tone-deaf sections easier to read. Ooh. I remember Rick went to Iran and did the great series of episodes traveling in Iran, and the basic message there is people don't start wars, governments start wars. The people of Iran are people like us, and they love great food and hanging out with Rick Steves, and they're charming, just like him. Rick is first and foremost a travel guide writer and TV personality. So his writing, NPR says, is optimistic and peppered with slightly cheesy personal anecdotes. And they say some of it is almost condescending. At a Serbian market in the chapter on the former Yugoslavia, he describes, quote, salt of the earth couples as rustic as the dirty potatoes they pulled out of the ground that morning. Rick's seminal book, Europe Through the Back Door, had a 30th anniversary in 2010. So now that's a book that's been republished every year for 4 decades. And in Rick's For the Love of Europe, his newest book, there's some pictures of Rick in there, never before published, of him as this groovy 1970s backpacker, the long hair and the glasses and the funky bell bottoms. And I think Rick first went to Europe and had such a great time that he's like, I'm going to make a career out of this. Hell. The first edition was printed at Snohomish Publishing, 2,500 copies. That's probably the minimum order for self-publishing back then. 1982, Europe Through the Back Door publishes its first travel newsletter, a legal-sized page folded in half. And Rick drives and guides 5 3-week Europe minibus tours. $999 per person plus airfare. Europe Through the Back Door is translated into Japanese in 1989. Rick Steves, stuck at home cutting onions. Rick Steves, on his couch munching Funyuns. He plays taps every night and the people of Edmonds whoop and holler. Rick Steves, you are the guy that I want to follow. He's a good guy. I like doing this episode of the podcast because we're not talking about people with a horrible dark side or people that have overcome some horrible addiction during which they behave badly. No, we're talking about Rick Steves. He's just a great fucking guy. And this has been Doomed Planet, episode 43. Everybody loves Rick Steves. Goodbye.
Fascism. We hear this word a lot lately, but just what is it? The word comes from the Latin word for this, a fascis. The idea? Well, you can break one stick easily, but when you bundle them together, they become very strong. And when a dictator convinces an entire nation to march together in lockstep, they feel strong too. And in fascism, an axe symbolizes that it's unity with discipline, brutal if necessary. I'm Rick Steves, and in this special program, we'll learn from the hard lessons of fascism in 20th century Europe. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye, this is the end of the song.